Okay, today I'm reviewing a Moira main who plays on console and has been playing the game for many hours already. Her peak is around 3.8k and is currently in low masters. One thing that has to be noted is the fact that ranks are very different on console compared to PC, and I will try to point out things that I would have done differently in this situation. And for the ones who don't know, I've been playing the game since release. I have well over 3000 hours in the game. I have played all roles and a good amount of different heroes as well, with a peak of 4k something. I do have experience at all ranks playing with friends, and although I'm not a professional coach or anything, I feel like I have enough awareness to understand how the game works in general, and can hopefully point out a couple of things that I think would help improve as a player. There are always gonna be unlucky games where it is not specifically your fault, but the only person you can improve is yourself. So in this case I will try to not look at teammates as much, because I'll be putting my focus on Moira. Sometimes it is unavoidable to lose a game due to other people, but we all get those kind of games and there's nothing you can do about it other than communicating. And also please keep in mind that there is no 100% right or 100% wrong. There are different ways to play heroes, a map or a whole game even. Everything is always easier said than done, because everything is happening in real time while you play, and you are somewhat stressed or pressured during the game, so everyone makes mistakes, including myself. So the best thing you can do is to minimize those mistakes, don't turn them into habits if you really want to climb. So this game review is about me giving you my personal opinion and tips about how I would have approached things and if I were in your given situation. A lot of playstyles vary depending on your team, how the enemy team plays, and what map you're currently playing, but I try to give general input that can hopefully be applied to most games. Some facts about Moira in general is that you heal 65 HP per second and another 65 over 4 seconds with a range of 15 meters. Since you have a healing over time effect, you can preserve a lot of energy and still heal people. Additionally, your healing orb also heals 65 HP per second, up to 300 if fully depleted. And the damage orb can be strong too if used at the right time, with a total of 200 damage. Coalescence is going at 140 healing per second on teammates and lasts 8 seconds, which is pretty strong, and the damage output is sitting at 70 per second and can go through shields. Moira used to be much stronger than before, but she actually has been nerfed due to her strong healing and damage output with high survivability. A general thing that I have noticed already is the movement. It looks very typical for console players with the lack of jumps or unpredictable movement patterns. It makes it a lot easier for enemies to shoot you if you walk in a predictable line, but I also don't know how complicated it is to play on a controller. Another thing that I noticed from having a look at the gameplay beforehand, before I started recording this, is that you really are a healer more than anything, because you tend to heal people even if it isn't really necessary, especially when Moira will run out of healing eventually. So let's go back in the replay. So I hope I've mentioned everything that needed to be mentioned. If there are any questions by the end of the video, of course feel free to ask, or anybody else who's watching this video. Hopefully it's gonna help not just her but everybody to find a balance for yourself and find something that works for you. So the first thing I already notice here is that she tends to heal a lot when there is no damage coming in yet. And right now, for example, if you look at the healing bar, it's already pretty depleted, despite the fact that people haven't really pushed yet. So if you look at the team, they are playing very defensive, they're already backing off a little bit. Both their shields are kind of cracked and low, but the fact that her team is currently attacking on King's Row, they have to put a lot more effort into doing something than the defending team. The defending team basically doesn't have to do anything as long as you guys don't push. So the fact that your healing is already pretty much depleted and somehow they got a pick on your Baptiste makes it already much harder to break through here. Just a general thing, you come out of spawn and you already have to heal so much. It's quite important as Moira to find the right balance between healing and damage. You can also think about it this way: if you manage to get a kill, or if you manage to pressure the enemy to force them to back off, to force them to heal more, that also means that there's gonna be less damage on your team. Because if they're lacking a DPS or lacking any person, they're already under pressure. Which means you need to heal less. And if you can find the proper way, like you can maybe apply your healing over time effect. As I said earlier, it lasts 4 seconds. You have 4 seconds to do something else. So you can spray your team, especially if they're not even critical. If they only have like taken a little amount of damage, you can spray them and you will most likely be able to heal several targets and then go back to damaging. It doesn't have to be your damage orb, especially if you have your healing orb out. It already has a lot of burst healing. It's gonna be 300 healing. And meanwhile, you can always try to damage the enemy more. The dynamite, for example, especially if there are several people being hit by it, it deals 175 damage, and therefore I would just spray all of them and that's it. As long as nobody's taking further damage, especially when your Reinhardt is holding up his shield, then there shouldn't be any more damage coming in. So spraying them and then moving forward, start damaging the enemy team, that's how you have to push or how to put pressure on the enemy team. Especially here when your Baptiste has used his lamp, his immortality field, that means your team is not gonna die anytime soon. He put it in a position where the enemy team cannot destroy it, which means you have a couple seconds, I think about 5 seconds, where people will not die if they're standing in it. So that means you can be a lot more aggressive, you can deal a lot more damage. The only thing that I don't like about it is that the timing was kind of unnecessary, to be honest. Like he didn't need to save anybody with it, he just used it. But you can also, instead of seeing people make a mistake or do something wrong, you can try to utilize that. So in this case, they're gonna be immune. You can see Baptiste, you can see Reinhardt, they're not gonna die from anything for 5 seconds. I would probably spray them and then just keep on attacking enemies. Unfortunately, they started using Bob, which means your team is already backing off, trying to stay away from it, to not take any damage. Depending on how much you guys communicate, I would just either burst it down, just kill it, or wait it out. But since you're attacking, it's a waste of your time. You have less time to attack, which makes it a lot harder for you. So as I said, it's much easier to actually do something on defense. I also noticed how your team split up right here. Your Reinhardt is to the right and I see that the Zarya is already pushing forward. So I'm pretty sure that he will die. Your team will not be able to get a counter pick at least. They're gonna have longer respawn times because their spawn is further away than yours. So if you lose someone but you also get a kill at the same time, it's gonna be in your favor. So there's one thing that I always notice is that you specifically, you don't jump a whole lot, or you're like moving in a predictable line. So if I was a DPS, if I was a McCree or anything on the enemy team, I would have such an easy time to just shoot you. But then again, I don't know how difficult it is on a controller. Okay, now you're committing ults. I'm not sure about that lamp again, but okay. Can be used, you should be safe in here. That was really unfortunate. You needed that lamp, you needed the immortality field for the graph. Because you can always think about it this way. If you have your ult, then the enemy team is probably gonna have it too. Especially if they have wiped you. And if they wiped you, that means they have dealt more damage, because none of them have died. The more damage you deal, the more ult charge you get. So you can always think about like, okay, I have my coalescence, which means they are gonna probably have something too, like at least a shatter. Zarya's graph ult generation is the slowest in the game of all heroes. Apparently he already had it too. Good thing about this situation is that they used 3 different ults. So you should have the advantage for the next fight, but unfortunately you used both Baptiste and coalescence. Your Ashe doesn't have much ult charge and Echo shouldn't be using it right now. That's her second Bob, which means she's getting a lot of value out of dynamites and such. Okay, it's good. If you see something low, you can always kill them with coalescence, because you're at a safe distance. It's fairly easy to hit them. That Echo is getting her ult really, really fast. I'm actually surprised how well an Echo can generate ult charge with a controller. I can hear an Ana to the right, I would punish that, but you're already pushing somewhere. And also in this case I would rather have the Lucio push the payload, because if something happens he has at least a speed boost to get there faster and your healing is just stronger. especially because he already has his ult, so if you could get some extra ult charge, that would help your team out a lot more. That is more of a communication thing. Okay, so they committed with ults, and they also committed with another Bob again. In this case, I wouldn't just be sitting on the payload, because you've been using an ult, and they're committing, and they're gonna push in, they're gonna do something, and they need your help. So it's not that important that one person is pushing the payload, because it's not gonna get very far with that speed. It's better to actually win the team fight, help your team, secure the win, and if you win, then everyone can come back to push together, and then you will cap it anyway. So I would probably go forward here and actually help your team out. You did throw an orb, but I think it will just bounce all the way back because of the angle that you used it at, and it will not actually reach anybody who needs it. Yeah, here's your orb, hello. Okay, so that's a general thing. I think it's more important to win a team fight than going to the objective. I often notice that on King of the Hill maps, or like capture maps, where you have to reach 100%, and especially the first team fight, people oftentimes go high ground or something, or like commit to one direction, you're all fighting there, and then one person just decides, oh, the objective is gonna unlock, I'm gonna walk there and cap it. But that also means you're one person down, so you're fighting 5v6, and because of that, the team with the 6 people is probably gonna win the fight, and then you all wipe and they cap the points. So there is no reason to cap a point for like 5 to 10%, and then you lose the fight anyway. And that's kind of the same here with payloads. Yes, you do want to have people push it as much as possible. You did push it while there wasn't too much going on, but if there is like a big fight going on and people are committing, people are using ults, then they need your help. They need you because they are fighting 5v6. So it is much better if you win the fight, and then you can have 3 people on the payload and push faster together. Unfortunately, you got shattered here and Ryan died, even though you have high healing on Coalescence. I think it would have made a difference if you would have been with the team much earlier, so you could heal them sooner. I also think that Echo wasted her ult and you're basically just staggering, not really in your favor. Your Reinhardt pushed too far, probably thinking that you would cap by now. Okay, at this point I feel like your entire team is staggering so hard with using ults. You already lost your Rhine after you used your Coalescence. That was the first ult that you used. You also used his Shatter earlier that fight. Echo copied a Lucio. That is not the best pick. And then your actual Lucio is also using his beat, and Zarya is using Graph. It feels like you're using a lot of ults and committing, but I don't think you're actually gonna win this. The only good thing that came out of that fight is that they also used a lot of ults, but as I said, like, you have to win the fight and you have to push to the checkpoints. It's much easier to defend than it is to attack, at least at lower ranks in my opinion. Here would have been a good situation to maybe get a pick on that Hanzo. He was up in the window. Your orb, as I said earlier, deals 200 damage. And if you would bounce it off correctly, and he would probably back off to the right towards his team, and you would angle your orb that way and it fully depletes on him, you might actually get a kill on him. The situation that I meant with the Hanzo in the window is where you could have killed him potentially, because he was gonna be in a small hallway, and if you throw your orb at the right time, you can deal a lot of damage to him without doing anything more if he gets hit by the entire thing. Okay, unfortunately you lost your Echo. Depending on that fact, you could hear that she died behind, which means Soldier must be behind, because as you can see in the kill feed, he is right there, so that is a threat, and then I would be more careful with my positioning. He already used his visor the fight before that, so that is not dangerous, but I would still be careful, because a soldier can still kill you in like a second. That Coalescence didn't really get to your Rhine. I felt like the timing was a bit off, If you use coalescence in that position right there where you were, let me go back a little bit, they're like kind of around the corner already, so they can just move to the left and just avoid all of your coalescence. The fact that they also have a Moira, it's really easy to heal up. You just spray everybody and put an orb in, and that will out-heal all your damage. And then you also got zoned out by the dragon, so not a whole lot you could have done. Zarya is... I saw that you were like tilting a little bit to the side to heal your Zarya that was asking for heals, but he is basically safe. You know where the enemy is, you know that they're at the payload around the corner, so your Zarya doesn't really need the healing because you are using your ultimate and you don't have it all the time. So I would try to get more value out of it, especially when your Reinhardt is still there and you were zoned out by the dragon, you can still reach him. I think you were more DPSing the enemy Rein that you're not gonna kill anytime soon than healing your own Reinhardt. And now that you only have like 5 seconds left, it's gonna be the final fight. And unfortunately you lost him, they just shattered because there's no frontline anymore. Not sure where your Zarya went, wasn't around anymore. Wasn't so well executed as a whole team, to be honest. I feel like the last fight really hurt yourself, because it was a very long, stretched out fight. You had quite a bit of time, but you didn't get anywhere other than losing all the time, wasting ults, and then in the end having to rush there because you're running out of time, but not having more resources to cap. So the fight started around now, when basically your team committed with sound barrier, and okay, Echo got a pick as well, so that was really good. So it's even though. It's still 5v5 because you're on the payload and their soldiers dead. And you had about 2 minutes and 17 seconds left at this point. I'm actually surprised that nobody is just shooting that Bob faster. I would just destroy it or get out of line of sight, but since he was in the middle of the street, it's not that easy to walk out of line of sight. Yeah, so you committed a lot of things. It was, first of all, nice pick by Echo, that was good. Then wasted barrier. Then your Rein got grabbed and he used Shatter. Then used Coalescence to try to keep him alive. And then used Bob. And then after that, your Echo copied their Lucio, which is not a good pick, to be honest. So like you stretched out this entire fight, and then you barely even had the chance to recontest when you had 5 seconds left, and then already lost a person before the fight even really started. Especially when you have sound barrier. A lot of people have a lot of HP. I mean, look at your Lucio. His health bar plus the shield. That's so much HP. He's not gonna die anytime soon. So I would utilize that at least to deal more damage and try to get a pick. Because even if it was wasted and you might think like, oh my god, why did we use barrier now? Like we don't need it, or I don't know, why did Echo copy the Lucio? It's such a bad pick. You can always try to utilize everything that your team is using, even if it's a waste. Especially Zen, for example, that's a good example actually. They just use trance for no reason, absolutely no reason at all, but you can still use it to push with it, because you're gonna get enough healing. The same goes for sound barrier. I don't think that shift was necessary. That is something I actually told another Moira main, but he's at a much lower rank and quite new to the game still, that he just unnecessarily shifts for no reason. Like you can use it for defensive purposes, or if you're low, or if you are in a really bad position and you're trying to avoid an ult or something. That's when you can use it. But here you were not in danger. Here you didn't need to use your shift. Now you have another sound barrier, so yes, now is the time to damage them, because you want to cap this point. It's only 4 meters. If you wipe them, you get the checkpoint and you can keep playing after that. What happens after doesn't matter. What's important is you need to win this fight. And you're committing ults. Again, like you have another sound barrier because you had 2 Lucios, which means your team has a lot of HP. So that's the time to actually DPS. I feel like you're really focusing on healing your teammates a lot. Like making sure that they are alive, making sure that you do your job, your main job, to heal, but you're not just a healer, you're a support, and support means that you can help them get some kills. If there is no healing that you need to do, then you can definitely get out some damage, because if you help get a pick, if they're pressured, if they're low, if they need to back up because they are taking a lot of damage, that automatically makes your team take less damage. And also I would just take a lot more natural cover. You don't necessarily always have to rely on your Reinhardt, because he will take down his shield eventually. He will use Fire Strike, he will have to recharge, so you are not safe, especially when they have a Hanzo or anything that can one-shot you. I would rather be in a safe position. Well, in this case I just think there was no good synergy in this team. You could have saved up ults, used all 6 to wipe them, for sure. That is usually a solid strategy to use. If you have a lot of ults, then they will not be able to out-heal it. They will probably not be able to counter-pick anything off of your team, and they will probably not win. But we are looking at your personal gameplay, so one thing that I would have done better here, or differently, is that I wouldn't have just sat on the payload and actually helped my team out when they were having a team fight. Because you're literally missing a person, and you would easily win that fight, because your Echo luckily already got a pick on the enemy soldier. So you have the advantage because you're one person up, and that already means that there's a lot less pressure on your team, a lot less damage coming in, and it's gonna be a lot easier to push them. So first round I would say there was just too much unnecessary healing. Make sure that you don't just randomly use your shift, because you will need it for something. You can deal more damage to pressure the enemy when healing is not necessary, like during lose your sound barriers. Oh yeah, now that I see that Echo on the enemy team right there, I remember you saying that you think that Echo is OP. Whether or not that's the case, it doesn't matter, but Echo actually has to be quite close to someone in order to kill them. If you keep your team above 50%, then her beam, her focusing beam, is not gonna deal as much damage at all. She can only do this like so-called one-shot combo if she hits all her right clicks that you can see on your screen right now, like those little blobs. If she hits all of those, it's gonna deal, I think, 175 damage on a squishy, for example. If Echo only hits a couple of them, as long as it gets them below 50% HP, she has to get a little closer, kind of like Zarya's range with her beam, or Symmetra's range. That's when she will kill something real quick. So all you need to do against an Echo is basically keep everybody above 50%. You can always keep track of where Echo is and look at what she's going for. And since you're Moira and your aim is very, very forgiving, then you can easily get her low. And Echo is actually really squishy. She doesn't really have much survivability if she doesn't have any healers to take care of her, especially when she's like flanking like this. She's on that side. And her healers are Lucio and Moira, and they are short-range healers, which means as long as Echo's gonna take damage, nobody can heal her. So if you get her low, then she will have to back off. She will either have to go down here to get a health pack, or she has to back off to get back to her team to get healing. So that takes a lot of pressure off your team already. So that's what I mean with like trying to balance damage and healing. You don't necessarily only have to heal. If you can deal some damage to relieve some pressure from your team, so you don't have to heal. That's good that your soldier got a pick on her. Ice Wall was good. Reinhardt instantly punished it. That was a good hold. That shift was unnecessary again. Just would deal, especially when your healing bar is so low, you try to sap people as much as you can to just replenish it as soon as possible, because you will need it for the next fight. Here I feel like you're healing way too much again. Like, looking at the top right, the team 2, you can see all the health bars. They are barely taking any damage. First of all, you have another healer. He can heal. You already have your coalescence, something that I would consider. I usually don't mention that too much for people at lower ranks, but you already have your ultimate. Your other healer still needs his ultimate, and how to get your ult is by either healing or damaging. So let him have some healing, especially now when your healing is very depleted and you will need it for when they push, and your other healer could use some ult charge right now. I would also be very careful standing here in the open. I call this an open area because you're not close to any natural cover. Natural cover I consider any wall or any thing that you can hide behind to avoid damage, like in this corner here, unless they flank through the hotel, but that's something that you would just have to pay attention to. Or let's say, I don't know, around the corner here, anything that is kind of like a shield, or something that breaks line of sight, and something that keeps you safe other than your shield tanks. But standing here in the open always leaves you vulnerable to getting sniped. They play Hanzo, they already did that last round. If you open up the like team thing, then you would see that they have him, and I would be very careful with that, because one unlucky kill by him might lose you the entire first point. Healing priority is something that is very important. You can see your Zarya has taken a lot of arrows to the face. It's pretty low, but if you know what Zarya actually has, which is 200 shield, then she will regenerate automatically, and she's already like backing off to a safe position, which is natural cover, as I mentioned before. She will probably not take further damage than this, so you don't really have to heal her. But there is still a fight going on here. There are still people in the middle of the point, in the middle of the street, potentially taking a lot of damage. And then unfortunately your Mei dies. I don't know if he had his ice block, but that's unlucky, because now they're gonna push. I would do the same if I was the enemy team. If you get one pick, that's an advantage. That's 6v5. So now is the time to put pressure up, because there's no damage coming in from Mei, no freeze, no nothing. And I see your Rhine is backing off because his shield is low, and you're about to take some damage, which is fine. You don't have to contest immediately. You can even let them take a tick if necessary. Unfortunately, you got shattered here again. Your Rhine has to stop it. It's your Rhine's job to block shatters. But you could also stand somewhere where you're more safe. You can always listen out for the ultimate voice line. You can actually shift out of it before it lands to save yourself. Or you could be just around the corner, around natural cover right here, because you were already backing off a little bit. So I would have probably gone this way to save myself, or use my shift because you had it exactly for that. Generally, engaging with Coalescence first when your team is not going in yet is probably not gonna kill anything at all. So I hope that at least you were calling it out on the voice or something, that now we should push, now we should go in. They kinda did go in, but it was more like reactive, like, oh shit, we're using ults, okay, let's go. So it's like, sure, Coalescence is very strong, but if they are prepared, if they have nothing better to do than to just out-heal it, then you will not have much value out of your Coalescence, sadly. And they even just counter Coalescence to heal all the damage that you dealt. It heals more than it deals damage, so that's completely negated. Plus, your team was taking a lot of damage, and your Coalescence was only meant for damage. I know that you were healing your tanks too, but they just got out damaged. Like, it cannot be healed. They have much better focus damage. It's good that you're not peeking too much, because you might die, and if they get a pick now, then you're probably gonna lose the next fight. Okay, good that you shifted out of it. This is what I mean if you use your shift unnecessarily just for mobility or just because you can, because you need it for situations like this to get out of Graph or any other ult to save yourself. The lamp was a little too early, to be honest. Baptist's immortality field could have saved everybody if you would have waited a little bit, and using your healing orb into them was fine, spraying them was fine. You're trying to keep them alive because you know they're gonna take a lot of damage. Unfortunately, that was just not good enough, because the damage is much higher than you can heal. So I'm actually not surprised that they all died, especially immortality field being way too early. I feel like there was some kind of bad synergy between your teammates and not knowing when to regroup, when to stop, when to actually engage and when to use ults together. Because it just feels like your team is throwing out ults, but none of them have any value at all. And that Ashe was flanking all the time. I could hear him shoot from behind and nobody turned around to get him. So unfortunately that was a loss. So there were a lot of mistakes that were made as a team. I don't think there was much synergy here at all. Like, it felt like the enemy team was much more coordinated overall. They knew what they were doing. Damage that they took was just easily healed up. They knew when to back off together. And they actually pushed and took the advantage of like your team having one person down. So they pushed as a team and actually took advantage of like mistakes. I don't feel that your team was really doing that. They were not taking advantage of certain things. I felt like every time someone uses an ult, it was more like a panic. Oh my god, okay, we're going in. Apparently we're using ults and I'm just gonna press W and I don't know what I'm doing, but let's just go. So one person uses an ult and then it's like, I'm not sure if it's winnable or not. So another person uses an ult, another person uses an ult, and you're just wasting your own time without the enemy actually having to do a whole lot. Positioning is always super important. You can always use natural cover. You have to be aware of what the enemy is doing, where they are, what they have. If they have an echo and you don't have any counters, especially as a Moira, you can easily deal damage to her because your aim is very forgiving. Sometimes dealing damage is gonna help your team out a lot more than just healing them. Shifts can be used more carefully if you don't need to use it and you're not in danger or not taking damage. Then you can always save it for when you actually need it, for like graphs or anything that will maybe kill you. Remembering the ult status of the enemy team is always important. That is what makes you a better player, if you know when to save your stuff, when to attack, and how to counter it. For example, at the end of the game you were using your coalescence to push them. That was the first ult that you used to engage the enemy team. It was just countered by their coalescence and out-healed, which makes your ult basically a waste or not valuable anymore. Remember that the squishy basically dies in 4 seconds. If you damage a 200 HP target as Moira, it takes you 4 seconds to kill them if they don't get any healing or if they don't have any defenses or anything. Throwing an orb and right-clicking something, you can pretty much kill something in probably 2 seconds.